To install the Aero 111 intake, first you need to remove the stock intake, and here's how we do it. You will need numerous tools, so after removing the bedpan chrome cover, next you will remove the stock paper air filter. Next you will remove the mounting plate for the filter with 3 screws, and it's held on very tightly with a rubber gasket around the butterfly valve, so you'll have to pull hard to get it off. Next, you will want to remove 2 screws that are holding a mounting plate for the cool air intake coming into the back of the air filter. Now, by depressing 2 tabs on the power connector to the butterfly valve, you can remove it. You will remove 4 bolts that holds the throttle body in place, holding it carefully as you take the last bolt out so you don't drop it and distort it. Tuck the cable and connector through a hole in the back of the mounting plate. This plate will now come off easily as you pull it off the cold air intake gasket and the rubber pollution control tube. Push the cable through the mounting bracket. Now you can remove this mounting bracket, or at least remove the bottom 2 screws. You will need to raise the back of the tank in order to remove the cold air intake gasket. So loosen 2 screws that hold the back of the tank and carefully raise it up and place a wooden wedge underneath the back of the tank. If you are careful, you will not need to disconnect the fuel lines at all. With the tank lifted up, you'll be able to see 2 bolts holding on a metal bracket that mounts the rubber cold intake gasket. Once you get these 2 bolts out, you can wiggle and maneuver the rubber vent and the metal retaining bracket out from under the tank. Then you can put the tank back down in position and reattach the 2 bolts that hold it in place. We're now ready to begin installation of the Aero intake. If you remove this mounting plate, reattach it only using the top 2 bolts and leave them slightly loose. Loosely put the 4 bolts that hold the throttle body in place just to make sure your mounting plate is lined up properly. The kit comes with 3 standoffs, different lengths. The longest one goes in the forward mounting hole, the middle length one goes in the bottom hole, and the shortest one goes in the rear threaded hole. Next, remove the 4 bolts that hold the throttle body and tighten the 3 standoffs and the 2 mounting bolts. Now it's time to install the throttle body, but this time mount it with the motor for the butterfly valve facing up as shown in the video. Then secure the 4 bolts that hold the throttle body on. Now take your power cable for the throttle body and find a way to weave it up so it can reach the socket and plug it in place. Okay, now we're going to begin installing the actual air cleaner itself. This is where we seal, and because it's extra wide, we have to put in 2 filler plates. And they're split so you can slide them over. It takes a little bit of effort to get them on there and stretch them apart and press them into place. Now that these 2 filler plates are on, take one of the longer screws and slide it through and screw it into this standoff. Just enough to make sure you got it lined up this way. Then remove the screw, leaving it in place. That's just so it'll be easier to line everything up later. Next, you're going to take the 2 O-rings, and you should put a little bit of grease, silicone grease or engine oil, whatever on them. Just make them a little slippery at first. And place them on the remaining part of this. And you put 2 O-rings on. Be sure they're not overlapping or crisscross. You want them to be flat and sitting next to each other. Now we're going to put the actual seal. This hole is a little bit larger than these, so it slides over the O-rings, and that forms your seal into the intake. So if you get it the same place, your hole should be lined up. Next, take the aluminum billet backer plate. It's got the pollution control barb on the back side near the front. You have to hold this plate on because it kind of wants to fall off. Begin placing this one in place. At the same time, you're sliding the pollution control hose onto the barb, and then hold this in place. Now you're going to take this plate and place it over here. It's acting as a clamp, and you take one of the longer screws and slide it through. Now you're going through all those plates, all 4 plates, and threading it. I got lucky the first time. You might have to fudge around a little bit. Just snug it up slightly. And then there's one more over here, again with a long bolt. And you might have to rotate everything until you get everything lined up. And you screw it in. Again, I made it look easy. You might have to fuss with it a little bit. Screw these in just so they're slightly snug. You don't want to go too tight or you'll distort everything. Should be firm. Then lastly, there's a shorter screw, and it goes in this bottom hole. Again, these 3 screws are going. Alright, I cheated a little bit in editing. You may have to keep these somewhat loose and then work to get this 3rd one lined up by moving things around. And the standoffs can wiggle a little bit, so move everything around until you finally get this one started into the back standoff. Then you snug them down, just a couple pounds of torque, not real tight. Now everything's mounted. Again, make sure that your tube is hooked up on the back here. And this is all firm and solid and sealed around your intake. And finally, you take your special K&N filter and the aluminum cover plate, and you want to place the filter on the cover plate so it kind of nestles into the groove. When you first get it, it's not as cooperative as after it's been on for a while. Then, kind of holding the filter in place, install it over the mounting bracket, and just keep wiggling things around until you get the filter to nestle into place. And you can kind of tell when it's finally there. And last, there's 3 of these bolts, and they come in from the back and screw into this. They don't come all the way through, obviously, so you have to insert them in the holes back here. And you can begin threading them just by turning them a little bit. They're only screwing in about 1/8 of an inch or so. I got that one started. There's one back here. Again, just a little bit of wiggling. All right, I got that one started. May not go that easy for you, but I've done a few of these. All right, they're all 3 started. Okay, we're done. Everything should be firmly in place and you're ready to go out and hit the road. You now have The second largest air filter available for the Indian 111 bikes. We also make the largest one called the Air Monster.